There's been a lot of thought in this past year about rethinking Robert Moses' legacy, and then now this Jane Jacobs exhibition. And I was interested to see whether these two, giants of 20th century New York life, whether they actually met in person, whether they actually were ever in the same room and had a conversation. Apparently, they met only once at a meeting of the New York City Board of Estimate over Robert Moses' plan to enlarge a road through Washington Square Park. As you know, this would have eventually linked up to the ill-fated Lower Manhattan Expressway that Jane Jacobs so adamantly opposed. She said this about Moses: "He stood up gripping the railing, and he was furious at the effrontery of this opposition. And I guess he could already see that his plan was in danger, because he was saying, there is nobody against this. Nobody. Nobody. Nobody but a bunch of mothers." And then he stomped out.
Our readers live in communities that are not addressed by traditional English language media. And in many respects, Hispanics in New York and the working class New Yorkers have been failed by both traditional English language media and the new media. It's often overlooked that there is a very significant digital divide, not only in New York, but in the United States.
One of the things that blogging does is create a community that is very resistant to the forces that are kind of perniciously affecting journalism these days. When your journalism is being conducted by 1,000 people, all going off in different directions, it's very difficult to pressure them with intimidation tactics or by refusing to give them access. And there's a certain kind of honesty, even in the unruliness, that very much reminds me of the streets that Jane Jacobs said were so important to a healthy community.
In the case of Atlantic Yards, we get what I call the Atlantic Yards narrative, created by the developer, backed by the political establishment, and too often aided by unskeptical or cheerleading media coverage. My job is to challenge that narrative and to help build a more credible one. In the Jane Jacobs era, that job was played mostly by the Village Voice. Today, it's more likely to be a blog, and it's daily.
My origins as a journalist when I was 25, and the man who still is a journalist at 75 are the same in method. I never used the tape recorder in my life. I don't use technology at all. I do not use email. I don't Google anybody. I don't want anybody to Google me. I want to have a sense of familiarity with the people I'm writing about. I want to look in their faces. I want to hear not necessarily what they say, but I want to see their expression. It is hard to be a good reporter. Legwork is time-consuming. Patience is necessary. And that sounds cranky, but Jane Jacobs is cranky, so.
With so many different news outlets, so many different television channels, what is the room for mass media in an age of increasing specialization?
The transition from paid dead tree papers to online operations tend to involve fewer and fewer journalists covering the same range of daily issues and concerns with less time to do it. And my concern there is, it's really whatever the delivery mechanism of news, doesn't matter, whether it's a paper or the internet or your cell phone. The issue is whether you're really going to get original, investigative reporting, and that is, I think, the big issue of American journalism right now. That is the issue we face.
Good writing is visual. Good reporting is visual. Good reporting that's visual comes from being there. It doesn't come from sitting and looking at a screen. It comes from getting off your ass and going somewhere. I think I'm a little bit wary of whether the technology is going to take over, and it can't. It shouldn't. If it does, then let's go to blog and fall in love.
Does the proliferation of media necessarily mean a greater democratization of the public process?
I think that there is a democratization of interests and of voices that comes up through the blogs.
I find it kind of hard to get upset that there are a disproportionate number of blogs in Brownstone, Brooklyn, when there are only 2 or 3 or 4 reporters in the Brooklyn bureaus of the major dailies. I mean, I think that's a bigger problem. The bloggers are contributing to more stories, but yes, there are more stories to be had.
If I was Bill Keller or Sulzberger, I would take the Washington Bureau's 55 reporters, whatever they have there, and I would send 30 of them out of Washington. Sell your house, sell your swimming pool, go away from Georgetown, and move around into the state capitals of this country and cover America from smaller capitals or from smaller towns. A kind of Jane Jacobs extension across the country of really getting out into the neighborhoods of towns that aren't necessarily in the headlines and get a larger sense of America. Give voice to those who are not the newsmakers. And the media can do that. And if it did that, it would really, I think, make a profit, because that's an area where the new technology is not extending its influence.
What I find, and my concern working for a newspaper with a mostly working class readership, is that the internet does not provide a forum for discussion among different social groups.
When you think of Jane Jacobs and her kind of activism, the willingness to speak truth to power, it just seems not to exist. And so often, it isn't just the matter that things are ignored by the mainstream, but it's that there's a pretense at paying attention to them. What do we have to do to have the issues and concerns of everybody be addressed?
You were speaking, when you mentioned Jacobs, of the age of dissent. That's when we had James Baldwin railing from Harlem, writing beautifully. We do not have today, in this city or in this country, someone who represents dissent. Who is the Jane Jacobs say? We don't have that now. We're in a very bad time in this country right now because we're not connected.
I strongly disagree with that. There is huge dissent going on right now. It's in the community that I work in every day. Move On has 3 million members. There are demonstrations going on. I may not be getting arrested, but that's what we do. We're very much activists. We're very much involved in dissent. It's alive and well, and that's what gives our community vitality.
It seems to me that Jane Jacobs would have been branded a NIMBY if she was being covered by our mainstream press today.
There's no substitute for an active, independent, diverse press. And if you want that, then support it.
The next panel discussion in this series will occur next Tuesday, October 16th at 7 p.m. It's entitled A Civic Activist Boot Camp, Working Within and Without the System. And that will take place at the Municipal Art Society between 457 Madison Avenue, between 50th and 51st Streets. If you have not already visited the exhibition at the Urban Center Galleries, I would encourage you all to do so as well. Have a good evening and thank you.